so thrilled. This Hall of Fame project has really taken off. After tonight, we will have had 42 inductees into the Brooklyn Jewish Hall of Fame. So that's really good. Don't be shy about applause. You know, we're doing that this evening. I want to make a couple of comments, which is to start out with, you notice this is a free event, and there's a reason for that. We want each and every one of the inductees to know they're being selected because of their accomplishments in their lives, and because we respect it, and because they deserve every bit of admiration that this Hall of Fame involves. It's very, very important because too many times in not only the Jewish community but otherwise, people are selected because they can help in terms of raising money. That's not what this is about. And we want to thank the City Council, which has been wonderfully supportive. We'll hear from Steve Levin in just a little bit. And makes a difference in making something like this possible. So they should know that their support goes a long way to making community happen. I just want to say a couple of things. One, it's been an unbelievable team that's been working on making BJHI work over the years. You're now part of that team, so you have an assignment when you leave. That's to go to the website. It's brooklynjewish.org. All of you have stories that you all have. You know people who have stories. And this is a populist history of the Jewish community of Brooklyn. So everything that you put in, every 100 words, every 150 words, are meaningful for posterity. They're part of our legacy as a Jewish community in this borough of Brooklyn. So that's what we want to start out with. We're going to move along at this part. I'm going to call Serena Rafe to come up, and then we'll hear from Deborah Schwartz, and I just want to quickly say thank you, thank you, thank you. She was a founding chair at the beginning of this, and the Brooklyn Historical Society has been absolutely wonderful, and we thank you.
My name is Serena Rafe. I'm co-chair of BJHI with Howard, and we have, as he said, a phenomenal board and team and council. We've been at this a few years now, so this is the culmination of a lot of what we know and what we've done. We're extremely proud of our accomplishments, and I wanted to just give you a little bit of background about BJHI and why it's important. Before we got started, nobody had thought to document Brooklyn and Jewish, those two words, and what the contribution of Jews from Brooklyn was to greater society. And when you think about it, Brooklyn has more Jews than Tel Aviv, or depending on the year, it could be plus or minus a few, but we're pretty much neck and neck year after year after year. And when you think about Brooklyn, you think about ethnicities. You think about Jewish people coming from literally all over the world, from the Middle East, from Eastern Europe, from Russia, from the FSU, from Asia, from India. You think of Jews really from all over the world contributing to Brooklyn and Jewish. You think of the languages that you hear on the streets. You think of the foods that we eat. You can find pretty much any kind of kosher Jewish food in Brooklyn, and nowhere else in the world can you equal it. And you can find fast food to fancy food. You can find, white glove service to cafeteria service. You can find anything in Brooklyn. And that's what we have. And we've contributed Nobel Peace Prize winners. We've contributed Supreme Court justices, scientists, artists, people in drama, people in the arts, in entertainment, singers, poets. You name it, there isn't a profession that a Brooklyn Jewish person hasn't contributed to broader society. And we were the organization that started to put all that together, because before we started to do that, nobody was putting it together that Brooklyn and Jewish actually meant something. We had a phenomenal event last week called Brooklyn's Transformation, from distorted image to hotspot. How many of you might remember that in the 60s and 70s you might have felt embarrassed to be from Brooklyn because of your accent, because of the way Brooklyn was perceived by broader society? And then you had Marty Markowitz on the scene, who made Brooklyn into the tourist place to be. And now it's the hotspot. Everybody wants to move to Brooklyn. And it's because Brooklyn and Jewish make a great match. So that's the start of BJHI, and that's one of the impetus for us having gotten started. And we're really proud of the things that we've accomplished. So I'm proud that you're here. I'm honored that you're all here. And I think that together we can move BJHI forward in ways that we haven't seen before. With that, I'd like to introduce Deborah Schwartz, who is the executive director. Do I have that name right? Title? President of the Brooklyn Historical Society. She was a co-founder, and she helped us get this organization started. Deborah?
Good evening. Thank you all so much for being here. It is very heartwarming to be asked to just say a few brief welcoming remarks this evening. I am so incredibly impressed by the work that Howard and Serena and Joe and Rita and Jim and so many people on the steering committee have put into the shaping of this organization. For those of you who have not spent a lot of time at Brooklyn Historical Society, the building that you're in today was built in 1881. It was originally the Long Island Historical Society, and really this is an institution that has committed itself to looking deeply into the stories that make up Brooklyn going 400 years back. And those stories are complex. Those are stories about immigrants and laborers and people who have invented themselves and reinvented themselves and been given opportunities that are quintessentially American. At the same time, it is really important to us to understand how much everything we do, whether we're Jewish communities or Muslim communities or African American communities or some of each, that our stories are a serious mix of the ways that we face the challenges in our lives. And sometimes that's in our personal lives, and sometimes in our lives as whole groups of people, as institutions, as businesses, as all kinds of manifestations of what it means to really be part of this great and amazing borough of Brooklyn. So we're very honored to be here welcoming you tonight. I'm also very honored to have helped to start this organization, which is essentially a grassroots organization of people in the community who have come together and have a very clear vision of how to represent the multiple voices and the multiple stories of Brooklyn Jewish communities. We hope you'll come back here and use the resources here. There's an amazing reference library on the second floor that's open to absolutely everyone. And we hope that the intersection of this organization, the Brooklyn Jewish Historical Initiative, and the Brooklyn Historical Society have many, many years in our future together. So thank you. Have a wonderful evening. Congratulations to all the honorees tonight. This is an extraordinary group of people, and thank you for being here.
As I'm about to ask Council Member Steve Levin to come up to say a couple of things, I just want to paint a little bit of an overview as we move into the Hall of Fame part of this. As Deborah said, this is an extraordinary group of people. I mean, extraordinary. And as Serena said, the representation of our community in terms of the diversity of talents and involvements is something we've paid attention to, and when you look at the stage, it's amazing. Here's the thing, and I really believe it. In the 5,000-year history of our people, there's never been, we're in the top 5, let's say, of Jewish communities truly in that history. What we've created in New York, and too often we don't pay attention to it, it has to do with freedom, it has to do with the talent of our people and the vitality of the people, and let nobody say that we're headed anywhere but up. And one of the people who's really been the spearhead at the council and been so helpful to us is Council Member Steve Levin.
Thank you so much, Howard, and I want to thank my good friend Rita Schwartz for making sure that the council pays close attention to the Brooklyn Jewish Historical Initiative, and I want to congratulate all our honorees and inductees into the Hall of Fame tonight, and I want to thank Deborah Schwartz and the Brooklyn Historical Society for hosting, as they do every year. So I'll just say that I think it's really important that the New York City Council continue to support this initiative so that we can capture for posterity the contributions of Jewish people in Brooklyn, also to capture this place in time. The 20th century in Brooklyn and onward is an important chapter in the history of the Jewish people here in Brooklyn. It is in large part the American Jewish experience, and I was just looking. There's an article a few months ago that came out that it said on one or a couple of blocks, I believe probably in either in David's district or in Old District or Chaim Deutsch's district, Jackie Mason, Alan Dershowitz, Sandy Koufax, and Elliot Gould all grew up at the same time. And that's just this, this wide diversity of contributions of Americans. You think of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and just the kind of amazing array of perspectives and identities that the Brooklyn Jewish experience produced. And just very quickly, I'll say, in my family, we came over in 1885. Immediately changed our name to Jackson when they were in Brooklyn, and within a generation became pure socialists. And so when I went to a family reunion this summer, we all identified as Jewish, but there was an Episcopalian minister amongst us as well. So. It shows that we're not always necessarily bound by a religious identity or a cultural identity, but there's something broad about the experience that makes the Brooklyn Jewish experience something to treasure and something to preserve. And I think that it's important that you're doing that here, and that the council can play a small role in that. So I want to thank you and welcome you all tonight. Thanks.
I know that Assemblymember Joanne Simon was here earlier. I don't know if she's still here. Could you come up, Joanne? As she's walking up, I can't help but say how far back we go to a different life and a different world, and created something very, very good, which was a National Task Force on Life Safety for the Handicapped. So it's a long way away. But
I was 12 at the time. So I just want to say that I'm delighted to be here, and I want to thank Rita for bringing this to my attention and encouraging me to come here tonight to give honor to this great group of honorees and my good friend Hank Gutman, and to also say that I'm so glad that the City Council has been a force in this organization. I, of course, want to thank my good friend Deborah Schwartz as well, who does an amazing job for everyone in Brooklyn, and really history in the country, right? because Brooklyn is so critical to our nation's history, and she does a fabulous job. But I also want to just encourage, you know, Rita, there are Jews in Brooklyn in the assembly, and there's no reason for us not to be supportive. So I want to just congratulate all of the honorees and thank you for the opportunity to bring my greetings. Thank you.
And I saw walking, and where's Kalman Yeager? Kalman, come on up. One of the new members of the council, thanks to someone else stepping out and stepping up. And now coming on the Hall of Fame, David Greenfield, we have Kalman Yeager as a new council member this year. Not so new already. And we thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Howard. Thank you. Professor Joe Dorenson is an incredible leader in my community, and he and my father were on a community school board for, 11 or 12 decades? Yeah, back in the 90s. So those who know Councilman Greenfield, former Councilman Greenfield, know that he represented the neighborhoods of Borough Park, Midwood, Bensonhurst, parts of Gravesend, parts of Kensington. A little known fact, this is true, I was researching this earlier today, is we also represent, as you know, Brooklyn used to be 6 towns and a whole bunch of villages in those towns. A little village known as, where I live, South Greenfield, it's true, which is the area around Ocean Avenue, Avenue M, and thereabouts. It's a little bit to the south, as you can imagine, Greenfield. So I bring you greetings from the villages of South Greenfield and Greenfield tonight to welcome this incredible class of inductees that all have contributed to Brooklyn in many ways. I'm not going to mention all of them, I'm just going to mention very quickly my predecessor, who is not only my predecessor, he was my councilman, very briefly. I am his councilman, he's my constituent, but he's also my friend. And he's an incredible leader in our community in the city of New York. He's made history in many different ways. One of them was that he was the first Orthodox Jew to lead the Land Use Committee in the City Council, making him the highest ranking elected official who was Orthodox in the city of New York for a very long time. 4 years, a tremendous leadership, really remade the landscape of the city in many ways and left an incredible legacy during his 8 years in the council. But while I have the privilege of the microphone, I've learned quickly that when you're in my kind of job, you get the microphone, you don't give it up until someone grabs you and pulls you away. Rabbi Cass, what an incredible, I have like a whole bunch of connections to Rabbi Cass. I don't know if he knows all of them. I'll tell you what they are. First of all, I live around the corner from the East Midwood Jewish Center. I don't daven there, but I do live around the corner there. My mother, in the 80s, taught at the Rabbi Harry Halpern Day School. That's a true story. And my cousin, I believe he is my father's, or was my father's third or fourth cousin, Cantor Joseph Adelson, was your cantor for many years. And Rabbi Cass, in addition to his many accomplishments, is the chaplain of the New York City Police Department. He's an incredible force in the city of New York, and he's somebody to be reckoned with in many ways. But I'm privileged to have the opportunity to speak on here tonight while you're being inducted. And of course, Judge Rachel Fryer, those who know of her history and her groundbreaking accomplishment, more words need not be said, except that she's doing a tremendous job on the bench. She's a wise legal scholar who is lending her voice of credibility to the position that she was elected to, and she's doing our community very proud. So with that, I'm going to give back the microphone. So how was I on time? Thank you very much again. Thank you for having me. I'm proud to support this work, and I'm grateful for everybody here tonight for everything that you do. Thank you.
So Kalman and I served on Community Board 14 together. Yes, the entire. So yeah, we have our experience together as well. We're going to move into the Hall of Fame portion of the evening, and I'm going to start with introducing Rita Schwartz. Rita Schwartz is a vice chair of BJHI, and she is going to be inducting in Mimi Sheraton in absentia. So Rita has something that she would like to say about Mimi. Mimi's words. Okay. And I will bring the award to you.
Well, she used to be Miriam Solomon. I'll give that to her when I see her next week. Mimi is.
Look and take a picture.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. I guess for those of us of a certain generation or upbringing, Mimi Solomon, or Sheridan as she's now known, or Mimi Falcone as she's also known, when I first read her cookbook, From My Mother's Kitchen, I said, no, this is from my mother's kitchen. And it's probably from everybody's mother's kitchen, because it has things in it like ribboners, like newspapers on the floor on Shabbos. So you don't get the floor dirty, of course, and you might trip on it. Like borscht, like how to make better matzo balls than somebody else, like the dried out meat and canned foods. And anybody else have other wonderful food memories like mine? But that was what I got from early years ago, getting Mimi's first book. When we asked her to come, she was also going to come, and then she said to me, I'm getting old. She's 93 now, and she's not feeling well. She's frail. And I asked her, and I'm sharing this with you, Mimi, can we come and do a video? And she said, I don't like the way I look. So she wrote some words that I've been thrilled to read for you. And she says, first, many thanks for the high honor and my apologies for not being able to be there to accept in person. Age takes a toll. But it is especially fitting that I received this from the Brooklyn Jewish Historical Society, as it was that combination of having been brought up Jewish in Brooklyn that awakened my interest in food. Although in no way observant of kashrut, my mother prepared many Ashkenazi dishes. She seems to have been a combination of Polish, Hungarian, Austrian, and some German mixed in her family. Along with some purely American food, and my father was in the wholesale fruit and produce business in New York's Washington Market. So there was lots of talk of food at home, related both to preparation and ingredients. The first sentence of her book says, so stop measuring and start cooking, which sort of struck me as I think I heard my mother's voice. In addition, my parents loved to eat out and took me along to many Brooklyn restaurants, mostly bygone. The first restaurant I recall was the original Lundy's. Everybody's been to Lundy's, right? When it was first built on a pier jutting into Sheepshead Bay, long before it regrouped on Emmons Avenue. There were also many forays into local kosher delis and Cantonese restaurants in the Midwood section of Flatbush. Those are all now kosher Cantonese restaurants, I think. Later, I developed a critical tendency towards lunches in the cafeteria of Midwood High School, my much-loved alma mater. I hungrily recall the great Coney Island hot dogs at Nathan's and Feltman's, and the wonderful hot peanuts sold at Ebbets Field during Dodger games, especially on Ladies' Day. I was recently disappointed with awful peanuts at Yankee Stadium. So chalk one more up for Brooklyn. And so these are some of the Brooklyn Jewish food memories, along with fond memories of everything else. Many thanks to all again, and I congratulate my fellow honorees on this very special evening, Mimi Sheridan Falcone.
Our next honoree is Howard Teach is going to be interviewing David Greenfield. They'll be sitting at the table, and we're going to be doing this interview style. Each interview is expected to take about 5 minutes.
To add to what Serena said, not about 5 minutes. We're very precise about this. We get times.
Is this like one
Dave-
of those Snickers commercials?
Yeah,
Not going
yeah.
anywhere for a while? Grab a Snicker.
So talking about Snickers, you know, everybody loves Snickers. How is it, David? You've been in politics all these years. You're the only person I know that nobody ever says bad things about.
No, you should ask
That-
Steve Levin and Coleman Yeager. I'm sure they can give you a list. I'll tell you, first of all, I really want to thank you, Howard, and Serena especially, obviously, and Deborah. This is an amazing institution. I was a proud supporter in the council. I visited. I encourage you to come visit as well. And thank you, Rita and Councilmember Levin, for your leadership, and Councilmember Yeager, and of course, Assemblymember Joanne Simon. Thank you very much. I didn't know there were Jews in the New York State Assembly. That's something interesting. It's a good little factoid there to know. So, you know, I like to think everyone has their own sort of shtick. My shtick is that I'm a straight shooter. I tell it like I see it. I think that both Steve and Common can vouch for me on that level. And that's for better and for worse, right? Some people like that, some people don't. The good news is that when you meet with me or talk with me, you always know where you stand. I think most people appreciate that, right? It's pretty rare, I would say, in the business of politics or law or administration that I'm in right now, to find someone who just sort of tells you what is really on their mind.
Where'd that come from? Is that from your upbringing? Is that Brooklyn? Is that just you? And
Yeah,
nobody else who you
I don't know
is that
how
way?
you
or
could,
what?
how could you grow up in Brooklyn and not be a straight shooter, right? That's a Brooklyn quality, right? You know, if you want to know what's on someone's mind, just, you know, walk down the streets of Ocean Parkway and say, you know, good Shabbos, and the guy's like, it's a terrible Shabbos. I don't know what you're talking about. You're like, okay, I'm just being polite, buddy, relax. But it's never happened to any of you, maybe as an elected official. But the point that I'm saying is that I think that is unique to the Brooklyn experience. I think Brooklynites, we tell you what's on our mind, for better or for worse. And that can get salty sometimes, but not in this kind of forum, obviously. But I think that's a good advantage of being from Brooklyn.
Now, you went far beyond that. You were head of the Jewish caucus when you were in the council and really took a look at citywide. And of course, now you're in one of the most important positions, candidly, in terms of Met Council on Jewish Poverty, which it takes care of so many needy in New York, and many people don't even understand the latitude of that. Tell us
Sure.
about what this new position means to you.
Yeah, you know, there's 1.5 million Jews who live in the New York area. There's around 500,000 who are living in poverty. It's a pretty shocking statistic when people hear that. I think that really, when we look at the demographics and we break it down, there's 3 large populations. Seniors, thank God people are living longer than ever. Unfortunately, many people were not able to plan and just simply ran out of money. And so now we need to help people who have really built our city, right? And then I would say immigrants. We have a tradition of welcoming immigrants. We still have immigrants that are coming in every day. We have from France and South America, especially with the crisis in Venezuela. We're seeing a lot of immigrants that are still coming, and we're still, 30 years later, we're still helping a lot of the immigrants from the former Russian countries that are still struggling, and that's our responsibility. And then we see certainly a large need within the ultra-Orthodox community as well. And so those are the 3 largest segments that we really are working on and that we're constantly serving in our communities.
And one of the interesting parts to me, looking at you, David, not only have you been a mentor to many people, but you're a model to many people in terms of how they look at you and the way you conduct yourself. What would you say in terms of the tone of the time that Brooklyn and the way you've been really becomes as part of what this Jewish Hall of Fame is? You know, it's people to look up to. And we really need people to look up to, you being one of them. What does that all mean?
First of all,
to
it's
that?
an honor to be on the stage with such amazing honorees. I think everyone has a unique story. I encourage everyone to read about everyone's story and the work that they've done in their respective professions. I think it's pretty incredible, so thank you all, and I'm privileged to be part of such an amazing group. I think that, you know, the real story for me about Brooklyn is the idea that it's very egalitarian, right? I think if you ask most people on the stage here, very, very few of us were grown up with a silver spoon in our mouth, and we didn't have privilege growing up, but we scrabbled and we worked hard and we persevered. I think everyone's nodding along because that's the Brooklyn story, right? And we succeeded in our respective professions because that's what Brooklyn, I think, allows you to do. I think it's the diversity, it's the adversity, quite frankly. Brooklyn's not an easy place to grow up or to live, and somehow you make it work as well. And I think that's what makes it so unique. And I think the message that I would certainly transmit now that the beeping sound has gone off and I'm out of time is that anybody watching this, whether it's on television or in the audience, should recognize that really you have every opportunity conceivable in Brooklyn, and if you work hard with a little bit of good old-fashioned mazel, as we say, a little bit of luck, you can really accomplish anything. And you don't have to believe me, just look at the amazing honorees that we have up here tonight and the incredible things that they have accomplished.
Well, we're thrilled you're part of the class of 18. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
The next person that I'd like to call up is Ron Schweiger. Ron Schweiger is the Brooklyn historian, and he will be introducing and presenting the award to Rabbi Cass, Rabbi Alvin Cass.
First of all, I've known Rabbi Cass, I believe, 36 years. That's great. The same amount of time that you were rabbi at the East Midwood Jewish Center.
Correct.
Now, you must be doing something right that they would keep a rabbi for 36 years, all right? You tie him up and hold on to him.
That's because I'm in the same field as David, politics.
But longevity seems to be in your makeup because since 1966, that's, I believe, 52 years, if I did my math right, you have been the chaplain for the New York City Police Department. That's great. Way back in the last century. The longest serving chaplain in the police department's history. In fact, you served under 7 mayors and 16 police commissioners. Boy, I bet you got stories to tell. Can you elicit on maybe one of them?
Well, I'm delighted, first of all, to be here. And I have to tell you, as a rabbi, I think I'm the luckiest person in the world because I'm in a position where I can really enjoy people at their best. I can intensify their joy. I try to help them through sorrow. But the greatest pleasure of a rabbi, and the word rabbi means teacher, is to see your offspring achieve great things. And I'm on the bill here tonight with Adam Richmond. He's my student, my bar mitzvah boy. And it's... I had to work a lifetime to get some sort of recognition. He's just a kid. But the Talmud says there are those who are koneh et olamo b'sha'a achat. You can acquire your redemptive quality and your salvation in an instant. And it's just a joy to see a young person do that. The career that I have had has had high points. It's had very sad points. I was at Madison Square Garden this morning for police graduation, and I had to give a prayer for a firefighter who last night fell 3 stories in the Bronx fighting a fire. And we're praying for his survival. I'm sure you all join me in that prayer. And in the life of my family, we've had certainly adversities. As my daughter, who is here with me tonight, will remember, my son Danny was bar mitzvah at East Midwood Jewish Center. And like all fathers, I was very proud of him. He davened Shacharis and Musaf and read the Torah and the Haftorah. I wasn't in the house 5 minutes after it was all over, and I got a call that a Jewish police officer in Far Rockaway had been shot, and I was asked to respond. When I got there, he was already dead, and I spent the next 3 days trying to help his family wrestle with all of this and make funeral arrangements. This coming Friday, I'm going to be back here in Brooklyn at the East Midwood Jewish Center for a memorial service for a Jewish cop whose mother davens every week at East Midwood now, by the name of Joe Galapo, who died some years ago. And these are experiences that take a part of your life away, but the life that is taken away from you, you have an opportunity to give to somebody else who has suffered terrible loss. And that chance to intensify the life of people in good times and also to help them in bad times, I think is the greatest privilege in the world. And it's been my opportunity to be able to do that for my entire adult life, and I'm very thankful.
If some of you have never seen the sanctuary at the East Midwood Jewish Center, it's worth a trip. It really is. It was established, I believe, in the middle 1920s, and it's been about 82, 83 years. And it must have been a great pleasure for you to give your sermons and your teachings in that gorgeous, beautiful setting.
It certainly has been. And by the way, you can still see that sanctuary now on television. There's a program, Mrs. Mazel's, and the synagogue background that's used on that program is the East Midwood Jewish Center.
And if you didn't know, the Midwood, East Midwood, and the Victorian Flatbush communities are known as Hollywood East because a lot of motion pictures, TV shows, commercials are filmed in the area because of the gorgeous housing and the trees in the neighborhoods. The area, Midwood, comes from the Dutch Midwoud, which meant middle of the woods. And we still got a lot of those trees, okay? Well, it's been a pleasure, and I'm glad I was able to make it because I was in Florida this morning. We had a family bar mitzvah past Saturday, and my plane landed at 2:45, and I wanted to be here for Alvin, Rabbi Chaos.
Wow. Thank you, Ron.
The next interview is going to be conducted by Councilman Levin. Councilman Levin will be interviewing Henry Gutman. And so with that, we present the Brooklyn Jewish Hall of Fame Award to Hank Gutman. And the timer is starting.
Okay. So I will keep this introduction brief, but for those of you that don't know Hank, he is a civic leader par excellence here in Brooklyn, and especially here in Brooklyn Heights. Hank serves on the boards of Brooklyn Bridge Park Corporation Board of Directors with me, the Brooklyn Bridge Park Development Corporation Board of Directors, the St. Anne's Warehouse Board of Directors, and the Brooklyn Public Library Board of Directors. He's also the chair of the Brooklyn Navy Yard Development Corporation, which is really at the vanguard of economic development in the entire country. Hank is one of the most civically minded people I've ever had the pleasure of working with, and so it's a real pleasure and an honor to be here to interview Hank for his induction to the Brooklyn Historical Jewish Initiative Hall of Fame. So my first question for you, Hank, how have the Jewish values that you were raised with informed your public service?
Before answering, let me just thank Howard and Rita and the entire organization. I can't tell you how thrilled and flattered I am to be here. Walking in, I realized I really didn't deserve this, which made me all the more grateful, having heard biographies and accomplishments of some of my distinguished colleagues up here. That feeling's just intensified. Answering the and Steve, it's been a thrill working with you on all of these things, and with Joanne and other friends in city and state government. The values I learned from my parents. It's very simple, and they learned them from theirs. That we have an obligation, if we can, to give back to the community. And I've been very fortunate in that I've had some wonderful opportunities to do that, and I've tried to do the best with them. But again, I learned it where most of us, I'm sure, learned our values, from our parents and from their parents, and it's all part of the tradition that I've always identified as Jewish.
So all of these amazing Brooklyn institutions that you've been a part of, where do you place the value of institutions in the kind of bigger picture of Brooklyn and the bigger picture of New York City as a whole?
I mean, I actually think that the value and strength of an institution depends on the people, and you know, their adherence to whatever the mission is, their commitment to getting it done, their vision, their ability to imagine things that don't yet exist, to stick with them through difficult times and challenges. And heavens knows, on the park, we've been through a bunch of those together. So, you know, I think the institutions are important, but they're only as strong as the people who keep them going and pass them on from generation to generation.
And this might be an unusual question at a historical event, but you're a big believer in the future of Brooklyn. Where do you see the future going in our borough?
No, absolutely, and I should confess, I probably should have said this at the outset. I mean, one of the many reasons I'm not sure I feel qualified to be up here is that I'm a convert, not to Judaism, but to Brooklyn. I was asked before we began what high school I went to, and I was ready to name the high school in New Jersey, and I was told that didn't count. So,
I'm from New Jersey too.
there you go. Okay. So, no, I've been here since 1975. Raised my family here. My first job after law school was clerking in the federal court at Cadman Plaza, and then I worked on Wall Street, and it was the world's second easiest commute. My wife and I fell in love with the community, fell in love with the neighborhood, fell in love with the views, fell in love with the people, fell in love with the fact that it wasn't Manhattan, and that we revel in our diversity in Brooklyn and cherish it. And Brooklyn got cool despite us. It's now the center of the universe. I think its future is bright as can be and unlimited. Every time I go to a college reunion, a law school reunion, I meet classmates, including a law school classmate who was the governor of Mississippi. And when we talk about, oh, gee, are you ever going to be in New York? Are you going to be in Brooklyn? Give me a call. Every single one. I've got a daughter who lives in Brooklyn. I've got a son who lives in Brooklyn. All the talented young people from all over the country want to live here. So I think the future is incredibly bright, and I'm thrilled we made that choice 40 years ago and 43 years ago. And wish I could have been born here, but I've tried my best to make up for that deficiency. No, I think it's amazing. And you know, the park, where you and I worked together on the board, is spectacular. I mean, those were abandoned piers not that long ago. And now it's one of the principal attractions in the city of New York. People come, 5 million people came last year from all over the world and all over the city, and again, representing the full diversity. I love watching all these diverse people enjoying that park. And I mean, one of my favorites, Passover last year, watching a I won't call them a gang, a group of young Orthodox boys racing around on city bikes with the tzitzis flying behind them. They looked like a biker gang, only Brooklyn style. And now at the Navy Yard, where our mission is to take that old historic Navy facility abandoned by the Navy in the 60s and take those old buildings and turn it into manufacturing, a manufacturing home. For now, our latest count, we've got 8,500 people working there, and we're going to have, I forget whether it's 15,000 or 20,000 by 2020. Creating, in Washington, they talk about creating manufacturing jobs and middle-class jobs. I have the privilege of working with an incredibly talented management team that actually does that every day for the people in the city who need it the most. So, my parents started me on this path, but I consider myself incredibly lucky to have the chance to, in my own way, participate.
Thank you, Hank.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you very much.
Events like this come together because so many different groups help out, and I want to, as we're introducing Judge Rachel Fryer, I want to do a shout out to the Borough Park Community Council for assisting us in doing the reach out, and Serena Raffay will do the interview. If Judge, you would walk over.
Judge Fryer, in reading Judge Fryer's bio and in looking at her and seeing her accomplishment, I grew up in Bensonhurst, and when I grew up, my parents, you know, it was you grow up, you graduate high school, and let's look for a husband, and, you know, you're going to have children, and that's like the end. And of course, I actually moved on from that and was able to finish college and get a couple of master's degrees along the way. But, you know, that takes a certain kind of stamina. It takes a certain kind of person to be able to move up, move on, say, there are things that I want to accomplish in life, and to be able to be that role model for so many other women. And in looking at your accomplishments and all of the things that you've done, not just being the first judge, but the respect to, you know, to women, to be able to have an emergency service, to all of the things that you've accomplished really set a role model for women in the Jewish community. And I'd like you to expand a little bit on the driving force, on how you were able to accomplish some of those things. What your value system and growing up in Brooklyn, in Borough Park, and how that helped contribute to the role model that you've set for the future of Jewish women here.
Thank you. Well, first, let me take my drink of water. Okay. I'll make my bracha, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakol niyeh b'dvaro. And that bracha really encapsulates my whole persona, is that everything that happens is because God wants it to happen. And if you want something to happen, you just really have to work hard and believe that God controls the world, and then anything is possible. So I really want to thank my husband and my sons that are sitting here, and my mother, my sister, my aunt who are sitting here, because without my supportive family, I couldn't have accomplished anything. So my mother raised us girls, telling us, girls, you could do anything you want to, so long as it isn't illegal, immoral, or against the Torah. So here I was growing up as a Beis Yaakov girl in Borough Park, knowing that the world is wide with opportunity. I didn't feel constrained. I didn't feel restricted. I knew I had rules, but I knew that I could really go far. And thank God my husband is very supportive, and that's how I was able to accomplish things. But it's really my faith that God runs the world. And I had so many naysayers all along my path, all along my journey. And I still have them because I'm still on my journey. I haven't finished. And people are always telling me, it's never going to happen, it's never going to happen. I'll always say, how do you know it's never going to happen? If God wants it to happen, it's going to happen. I like to repeat this little story about the Hasidic rabbi, Reb Zisha. Right? Reb Zisha of Anapol lived in the 18th century, and he was on his deathbed, and he was crying. And his students asked him, Rabbi, why are you crying? You're such a holy man. You're going to go straight to heaven. And he's crying. He's saying, because I'm not worried they're going to ask me in heaven why I wasn't like Moses or why I wasn't like King David. They're going to say, Zisha, why weren't you like Zisha? We don't know the potential that we have. So I was raised with these parables, with these stories, with these understandings that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I'm Hasidic. It doesn't matter if I have my restrictions. Because if God wants me to succeed, I'll get there. I think my campaign was the most exciting campaign. Borough Park rocked. I mean, you had to see my boys with their long side curls, their long payas, saying, vote for Freie, Sisman Mama. And you know what? It worked. So I think that all of us sitting here are all part of something wonderful. We're all the part of the tapestry of Judaism, the tapestry that you can only have in Brooklyn. I don't think I could have done what I've done any place other than Brooklyn. So I thank God for that opportunity.
How do you find the balance between your home life and your professional life? And I mean, I know, I'm a professional, I'm modern Orthodox, and, I'm cooking dinner on Friday for 20 people, and, suddenly people show up, the kids show up, and it's like finding that balance between professional life and doing what you want to do professionally and accomplishing it, between the tugs that come from your home life, and being able to keep that balance and maintain that. I so admire your ability to do that.
Well, thank you so much. I think it's really like, we say that it's siyata dishmaya, it's really divine providence. Just pray a lot and hope that God helps me. I was once interviewed by a talk show host from Israel, and she said to me, she said, Ruchi, you know, you sit in criminal court and you hear about these awful crimes, and how do you go home and, you know, leave that in the court? And I thought for a moment, and I said, you know, Robertson, I think it's the other way around. I bring my home, my background, my values with me. The concept of standing up for what's right, belief, emunah, faith, you know, bitachon, all those concepts, if you have them with you, and I thank my teachers from Beis Yaakov. Growing up, I was born in Crown Heights. My parents moved to Borough Park when I was about a year old. And I think those values that we grew up with, and luckily I had my grandparents who were Holocaust survivors, and they also always taught us, be so proud that you live in America. Be so proud that you're American, because you have opportunities that we didn't have back in Hungary. So my mother always told us, go for it. My father also, I mean, my father thought I was a lawyer before I was a lawyer. I remember he calls me up when he says, Ruchi, I was in Manhattan, and I bought one of these magazines, the top 50 lawyers in the country. I didn't see your name here. But that's it. You know, if you believe in your children and you instill in them that faith and that concept that they could succeed, you can get there. I think that's really my story.
Thank you so much.
We're going to ask Adam Richmond to join her.
Refreshing to see a judge speak into a mic like this, not going, I like beer, showing calendars. Devil's Triangle is not a drinking game. Okay, I'm starting my timer.
All right, okay. So Adam went to East Midwood. My grandchildren now go to East Midwood, and my daughter was also at East Midwood. She went to the Talmud Torah there, and she had her bat mitzvah also at East Midwood. So we have a little bit something in common. I lived in Flatbush, not there now, but I live there. And Adam, you're a foodie. I'm a foodie. That's why we're married up here tonight.
Okay.
So, I mean...
Mom, I'm finally married. Are you happy?
You know, you're a self-educated food expert. How did your coming from Brooklyn drive you into that particular area of interest?
Well, I think, again, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Howard, and specifically also Professor Doranson, for including me in tonight. His daughter and I went to Midwood High School together, and it's an honor to be here with such an esteemed bunch of fellow inductees, and I just want to say that off the bat. I think, as my fellow Brooklynites, even transplanted ones, would agree, you know, there was the Brooklyn of Ebbets Field and the Dodgers and trolley cars and the steeplechase, and then there's the Brooklyn of ironic mustaches and white people living in Bushwick. And I grew up in that period in between, and as we talked about, it was sort of your resilience as a Brooklynite that sort of was your bond, but also this notion of the ethnic aisle at the supermarket or ethnic neighborhoods just didn't exist. The neighbors across the street were Sicilian. My neighbors to my left on Homecrest Avenue were Syrian. To the right, they were Irish. And we'd all play in the playground, and our moms would all share recipes. My father, may rest in peace, his law office was adjacent to Chinatown, and always instilled in me the sort of motto or credo, if you will, of you don't have to finish it, but you should at least try it. And I think that you grew up, I mean, I was born in '74, so there was an undiluted aspect to these cultures, and you can go to Astoria and be immersed in Greek cuisine. You can go to Arthur Avenue in the Bronx and be immersed in Italian cuisine. And I think that that's something that's so special. And then especially if you look at Brooklyn, you know, when it was just truly a melting pot. There wasn't this demarcation, you know, maybe a little bit of West Indian communities in Flatbush and Russian communities in Brighton Beach, but that was the beauty of it. And, you know, my best friend could have a last name like Eng, you know, NG, and then another best friend could be African American or Trinidadian American, and you know, all of a sudden you're learning about roti and you're learning about caponata as much as you understand shawarma or kibbeh or charosis or something like that.
So I had told you before, I'm Syrian, and so my ethnic background is Syrian food. My grandmother was a caterer. And you bring, I think what happens is that today we're seeing a fusion of a lot of different cultures in food. How do you see your background growing up in Brooklyn and looking at foods? How do you see that meshing with today's fusion that we see in restaurants and all kinds of food and recipes?
No, it's an excellent question. Well, I think that, you know, we already had someone very knowledgeable even say that I think in Brooklyn, no one really came from silver spoon backgrounds, and there's an absence of pretense. And so this notion of fusion was exactly what my mom was doing at the playground, taking an Italian woman's recipe and reinterpreting through the filter of a Jewish woman who grew up in Marine Park. And I think that there was fusion before there was fusion. You know, I used to go to East Midwood to go to school and pass a restaurant called Shanghai, and that is in and of itself a kind of fusion. I always say how, you know, when you see green bagels on St. Patrick's Day, you immediately sort of see two very different cultures moving at loggerheads. But that's the thing. I really believe that food kind of continues in that, exists within this continuum. And the story never quite ends. So growing up in Brooklyn, especially now with young chefs, really creating a great groundswell, giving Brooklyn a true culinary identity, restaurants like the Olmsted and Saul and Roberta's in Bed-Stuy, Bushwick, they're really helping Brooklyn be on the map for something other than 2 Cents Plain, the Coney Dog, and I'm not insulting any of that stuff. I mean, I'm blessed to have gone to Horn and Art and Seniors on Nostrand Avenue and Lundy's before it closed. So I think that that's the really special thing. We truly are a melting pot here. And if I just say one thing, I noticed that a lot of the people in the audience tonight are around my mom's age or older than myself, but to all the young people here, I just wanted to say how important our role is with Judaism sort of being both under attack and potentially in decline all around the world. Being a Brooklyn Jew, I wear a chain like in the shape of Brooklyn around my neck every day. But my Jewish identity and my Brooklyn Jewish identity is very, very dear to me. So I just hope that all the young people here continue to stay involved with this great organization and continue to make an impact in your communities because we are the future of it. And you know, my dad went to school with Gabe Kaplan and Barbara Streisand and at Erasmus Hall, and hopefully there's another new vanguard of Brooklyn Jews to sort of carry the banner.
As I'm asking our Senior Vice President, Joe Dornson, to go over to the table with Fern Perlstein, I'd like to comment as a follow-up on that. One of the things that you'll see is 5-minute segments trying to bring us into the technological age. They fit it well into YouTube. And in terms of our thinking, what we'd like to do, and this is a virtual Hall of Fame, everything is on the website. You'll be able to see the video of it. You'll be able to see the bios of everybody for posterity and all the ones we've previously inducted. And things that if you want on your Facebook or other things, you can send to other people to let them know about it. So we're trying, Adam, to have it available for your generation in a way of thinking that's accessible to them.
This is a wonderful evening, and I'm so impressed with the number of women on stage getting COVID, which they richly deserve, and Fern Perlstein is certainly one of them. So, although a Brooklynite for most of my life, I met Fern in South Carolina, where nothing could be finer to be at a Jewish humor conference. And I want to begin with a question. how did Jewish humor get to South Carolina? And why did you do the film, which got me in trouble in a way? I once lectured on Holocaust humor as a measure of survival, and my wife, who was in the stage, is in the audience, they can testify. They booed me off the stage. Fern Perlstein did a film called The Last Laugh, and she got away with it. Tell us how you did it.
How I got away with it?
Yeah.
Well, you know, first of all, I interviewed Mel Brooks.
Brooklyn Jew?
Brooklyn Jew, who gave me a certain amount of credibility. But really, we filmed a lot of Jewish comedians, but we found a survivor who's now 94, who is the heart and soul of the film, and she talks about her experiences in Auschwitz and her life and how she can find humor, and because it's sort of guided by her voice and her heart, you know, I think that, you know, we were able to, you know, open people's eyes to, like when they hear about the subject, they're upset. Then they see it and they realize that we did it with heart. And as you say, you know, it's like a form of healing and different things like that.
How did you find your way to Brooklyn? You were educated in California, the Harvard of the West, Stanford. So what brought you to this wonderful borough?
Well, my family. So I've lived in New York since the 80s, but when I had a family, we decided to come to Brooklyn, and it was the first, you know, I came from Philadelphia actually, so I'm also a transplant, and I was lived in this very, very Jewish community, and I had this sense of community that I never had when I lived in Manhattan, and when I moved to Brooklyn, I found that community again.
I want to touch on females in film. You are a Renaissance woman, and there are not too many female directors. I think Ida Lupino may have been the first in a very narrow group. Now we see women. Is this part of the Me Too movement, or were you there before?
Well, I've been doing it for 30 years, but there were always women. They're just not necessarily getting recognition. So they're there. They're there. And there's a lot of women making documentary films.
Could you enumerate, mention some people who are doing wonderful work, and if they're Jewish, please mention them too.
Oh, wow. Boy, you're putting me on the spot. Let me think about that. Can we come
Okay,
back?
well, let's go to another subject. Evidently, Brooklyn has been the scene of quite a number of films. Can you think of any film from Brooklyn, maybe a Woody Allen film, or and Alan King, I should mention, was married at the East Midwood Jewish Center, one of my favorite comedians. You couldn't interview him because he was dead. But he lives on in memory. And Adam Richman is also a comedian and actor, besides being a foodie. So please note. Tell us a little bit about other females who are doing great work. They don't have to be Jewish, but using Brooklyn as their base of operation.
Well, you see, I'm a documentary filmmaker, so I travel the world. So I've made films, you know, I made a film following Imelda Marcos, you know, in the Philippines for a couple of months.
There must have been a lot of shoes in that film.
There were a lot of shoes. I got to try on a pair of her shoes, actually. You know, I've made a film in Japan about sumo wrestlers. I've made a film about a leprosarium in outside of New Orleans. It was the last leprosarium in the continental U.S. So, you know, my filming goes to where the people I'm filming are, you know, so not necessarily in Brooklyn.
I want to mention in closing that you're married to a filmmaker, a writer,
who's here.
and who's here with a daughter who may be a future filmmaker. And I want to thank your family for supporting you, and thank you for coming and honoring us.
Thank
John Perlstein.
One of our board members is Ellen Levitt. Ellen gives tours of Brooklyn communities, especially lost synagogues. That's her specialty. We also have on brooklynjewish.org a list of tours that we can provide from among our expert historians on our council. Howard is going to be doing the next presentation to Cecilia Margulies.
This is a treat. Cecilia and I have done a lot of different things together, and she's one of the more modest people in terms of what she's accomplished, because too many people don't know. And whether it was in terms of your dedication in your family being Holocaust survivors, your Jewishness and your commitment to Jewishness, whether it was Emunah, whether it was in terms of Jewish heritage, the videos you've done, your total commitment to Israel, it's extraordinary. Where does it all come from?
Okay. First of all, I loved working with you. You know that. We had a lot of good times, still do. A lot of good projects. I think it all comes from my parents. Okay? I do feel that my parents were my inspiration. They both were survivors, and they both taught me the meaning of courage, perseverance, and living life in spite and despite all their losses, and the losses were great. My mother is and was amazing. She was one of the first authors of Holocaust books. When nobody was talking about it and nobody was writing about it, my mother was. And I was a little girl when I watched her write her book. And I participated as a little girl. I even have a poem in her book. And I was very young. And she's, unlike most survivors, she spoke about it all the time, to the point where I said, enough. But my father didn't say anything, and that was equally horrible.
So one of the things that you've done is written so many songs and done so many videos. It's really incredible. I guess that comes from your mother writing all the time that you started doing that. But tell us about some of what really moves you to do this, and I know how much you've done in terms of Israel.
So I have a lot of passion for different causes, for different things. That whatever ignites my passion, that's what I go after. For many years, I was just writing songs, and then I met a wonderful filmmaker, Daniel Finkerman, and we started to incorporate the music with videos, which really broadened my scope greatly. And I've been doing videos around the world, and I think I'm hoping to make a statement. I mean, we did a video in Poland, in Warsaw recently. It's being finished now. It's called Change the World. I'm trying to make that little statement, let's change the world, end the cries, you know, see each other with clear eyes.
Tell us quickly, because everything is quick here,
Yes.
about the Holocaust Memorial and what you had in Brooklyn and what you did in terms of moving it
Okay.
down south.
So many years ago, there was a school in Shalamit in Midwood, and my children went to that school, and my husband and I dedicated a monument. I actually designed it, and I found a sculptor, Anne Froman, who brought it to life. If you know the poem, The Last Butterfly, by Pavel Friedman, who was a victim in Theresienstadt. He died at 15 years, and he wrote a poem, The Butterfly. So I decided to do a monument in memory of the 1.5 million Jewish children. And I hired Anne Froman, and she did an amazing monument. It's a butterfly wrapped in barbed wire, and the poem, The Butterfly, is at the base.
And then it had to be moved.
So what happened? Shalamit had to move. I said, what am I going to do with my butterfly? It's such a beautiful butterfly. I want the world to see it. And I literally went shopping. And I was shocked. I went from one place to another, and my poor butterfly was rejected. And I was giving a donation. You know?
And then finally accepted.
One day, I'm in California, Simon Wiesenthal, the bookshop, and I see Paper Clips, the story, I don't know if you've seen it, Paper Clips, and it took place in Tennessee, and amazing place, and I see that the address of this place is 1 Butterfly Lane. I give a phone call to the principal, and this is an all-Protestant school, and I said, I have a beautiful butterfly I want to donate to you, and she tells me, Protestant lady, this is Bashert. And I said to her, Bashert? I can't believe, how do you know the word? She says, I know it, it's Bashert. And I shipped the butterfly to Tennessee, and we had a major dedication in this past September. The mayor came, the whole town came, and we dedicated our beautiful butterfly in 1 Butterfly Lane, and it's there for the world to see.
This is just a little peek into Cecilia and what she's accomplished. I really would suggest all of you go Google her and take a peek, listen to her songs, see her, watch her videos. It really is extraordinary what you've done. We're so thrilled that you're now part of the
Thank you.
Hall of Fame.
And I'm so lucky to be among such wonderful people here, such talented, sitting between these amazing ladies and the judge and all of you. Amazing.
Thank you, Cecilia.
Howard is next going to be interviewing Eleanor Risa.
Now, the only problem we have tonight with Eleanor is we can't have her performing and listen to the joy of who she is, what she is. It's amazing. This is world-renowned, as I said to her before, from European capitals to Brooklyn, all in between, Yiddish and English, Broadway. That's who you are.
That's part of who I am, and Brooklyn had a substantial role in my life and upbringing. I thought I might be Miss Subway, but instead, really, I've been honored here today, and I'm delighted to be with all of you and share this honor. Thank you, Howard. My parents were Holocaust survivors. They came to America in 1950 to Brooklyn. I was born 20, 30 years later. And, oh, it's true. And we lived, I was born here, and we lived, I tell people that we were the last white people in every neighborhood that we lived in. So we began on Cleveland Street, on Hendrick Street, and moved to Ocean Hill, Brownsville area, which is where I went to junior high school, to East Flatbush, born in Bethel Hospital, went to Tilden High School, moved further east to 1640 Ocean Avenue, where my first apartment was across the street from the East Midwood Jewish Center.
It seems like that's the center of the world.
I guess so. I guess so. It all comes full circle. And through Park Slope and eventually into Manhattan. But
one of the things that really you can lend some information to all of us is you've been to so many of the international Yiddish festivals and other kinds of festivals. Give us a sense of what's going on outside. There's a resurgence of Yiddish.
there is. It's very exciting, thanks to music, thanks to the arts, and I guess because so many who came before us are exiting and have already exited, geht's anders gegangen. So there's been a resurgence of interest in Yiddish. And it's spectacular and it's beautiful, and people are writing new tunes and new poems. I used to be the artistic director of the Folkspina, and you see now that they've done Fiddler in Yiddish. Next week, in November, we're doing The 10th Man by Patty Chayefsky. I translated that into Yiddish, and there'll be a reading. So there's so much. There is so much going on, and it's, wir können reden Yiddish wie wir sind jetzt. You know, there's somebody to talk to, and it's really, as the Spanish like to say, a machaya.
And you've really been the centerpiece in so many ways in the continuing journey of this involvement with the arts. And you've also done Broadway. It's not just the Jewish world.
No, it's not just the Jewish world. In general, though, I find that what I am after all these years is a storyteller, either as an actor or as a writer or as a singer or as director, and ultimately, either in Yiddish or in English, I'm on the shoulders of my family and the people that came before me who taught me how to be and how not to be, and how to be funny and how to fight and how to be scrappy, which is kind of what Brooklyn is, and indeed the truth, which seems to be also what Brooklyn stands for, is emes, really. You say what you think.
You really do. And so we have 1 minute. And so in the minute, what I'd like you to do is just give us a sense of the vibrancy that all of this has meant to you. You've been involved with so many wonderful people, and so many wonderful people in the Jewish community over the years. It's really a gift, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I began working in the theater, for 35 years ago when I was just a little baby. And my interaction with different talents and different humans of all persuasions, some of the greatest Yiddish actors also who survived the Holocaust and who came to the United States, and I was very young actually, and worked with them and learned from them. And they taught me how to be on the stage, what Yiddish theater meant. And now I work with wonderful artists, Frank London, Zalman Mlotek. I worked with Adrian Cooper. We all worked together and have uplifted Yiddish into the contemporary world. And it's modern and groovy, and it's not dusty and stodgy, but it has moved into the times, and so it's pretty great.
Well, this is an incredible story as you listen to all of them, and we're just, it's amazing to have you as part of this
Well, I'm
Hall
honored,
of Fame
so
as
thank
well.
you so much.
Our next honoree, unfortunately, passed. His name is Abe Becker, but we are still inducting him into our Hall of Fame. Abe Becker is going to be, Joe Dorenson, who is vice chair of BJHI, will be interviewing Charlie Rosen, in honor and in memory of Abe Becker.
I spoke to Abe Becker a week before he died. He was incredibly delighted at that point, though failing in health. But the Malach HaMuvis, the angel of death, claimed him on Sunday. He was buried on Tuesday. But we have here, very much alive, Charlie Rosen. Charlie is a basketball legend at Hunter College, where he was center. At 6'8", he's very easy to look up to. He is a prolific author, and I asked him to come because of his recent book, one of many, called The Chosen Game. And one of the greatest pitchers that ever served on the mound, Sandy Koufax, not many people know it, Charlie does, was actually a basketball player. Charlie, tell us about the legends of the game who were Jewish.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Joe and Howard for inviting me here, and it's an honor to be on the same stage with such a remarkable group of people. Basketball was invented in Springfield. I always get the date wrong. 1892?
No, 1891.
1891. Okay.
But that's all right. 1 year among friends.
By the original Dr. J. Naismith, just before Christmas. And during the Christmas vacation, all the students kind of dispersed, and the game kind of spread. And one of the places it spread to was Brooklyn. And it kind of And actually, the settlement houses around here, specifically the Henry Street settlement house, became a hotbed of young Jewish boys, second generation mostly, playing basketball. And it's astounding how young Jewish boys took to the game. It was a new game. The rules were not very well formulated, and these kids, it was a way for them to become part of America, to become part of the American culture. And they just grew up and spread all over the country, up to Boston, Philadelphia. But the game that was played down in the Lower East Side was the prototypical game. The gyms were small, so the players had to move a lot and cut and pass and fake one way and go the other way. Hubie Brown, a Hall of Fame coach, who coached the Knicks for a while, called the basketball that was played on the Lower East Side Jew ball. And he says that that's the way the game should be played. And he says that, for example, for any basketball fans here, San Antonio Spurs played Jew ball. Abe Becker, there are a couple of Beckers, was one in a long line of great Jewish basketball players. He played for NYU in the 30s, in the 40s, and in the early 50s. Most of the great Jewish most of the college teams in New York, LIU, City College, NYU, featured Jewish basketball players. And Jewish basketball players were so proficient that the legendary Wonder Five at St. John's in the early 30s, which is certainly not a Jewish school, started 4 Jewish players. And the Jewish players were admitted to Holy Cross and at various places all over the country. And the greatest Jewish basketball player was Dolph Shays, who I had the pleasure to meet and deal with him, and he was a sweet, sweet man. But to show you how Jewish players were sometimes considered to be smart and kind of shifty and kind of soft players, well, Dolph kind of proved a lie to that. At one point during his NBA career with the Syracuse Nationals, he broke his right arm and he played with a cast. So he learned how to shoot left-handed and he used his cast to smash opponents in the face.
Amos.
So there is a tradition of great Jewish basketball players. Unfortunately, the only Jew in the NBA is Omri Caspi, who's an Israeli, and I had some contact with him. I interviewed him for the book, The Chosen Game, and he talks about how tough Israeli Jews are and how tough Jews are, and don't take them for granted.
That gives the lie to the image that Jews were invertebrate and weak. Jews fought back, and basketball became a vehicle for asserting one's dignity and pride. And I thank you for bringing that to the attention of readers, Jewish and non-Jewish, that once there was a game called basketball, and it was our game, the game of the chosen. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you. I've taken it.
We did this section in memory and in honor of Abe Becker, a Hall of Fame member of the New York College basketball crowd. One of the greats of his day, and we regret that he can't be with us tonight, but this was done in his memory.
We have a gift from Rita for each of the honorees. It is a DVD of the Isle of Klezmos. And for the honorees, just to let you know, the photographer is here to take additional photos. We also have boxes for each of your awards, so please don't forget to take those. And with that, we thank you for being here.
And we look forward to coming back next year and the year after and that. But more importantly, do follow what we're doing. We're going to be having a range of lectures, symposiums, other kinds of events, musical and otherwise, throughout the year. And we'd all love your participation. It's really important. And thank you to the class of 218.